So I put up my hand halfway through this evening, grilling a Christian, and asked, "Surely you can't believe in God and be a scientist at the same time."
Mm,
And I was given the answer that actually my journey, my story is that I have a background in brain imaging and functional MRI. I did a PhD in that at the University of Cambridge, um, and spent 10 years in the field of neuroscience. For the last 15, 20 years, I've been speaking, communicating, writing around questions of faith that people have and trying to communicate some of the reasons why belief in God is credible and worth considering. Loved the sciences. I decided as a teenager that I wanted to be a scientist, um, and I loved that. And I probably worked a little bit too hard. And I really looked up to my A-level biology teacher because I went on to study biology, chemistry, and maths at A level, which in the UK are the exams that you take to get you into university or college. And my A level biology teacher gave me a book by someone called Richard Dawkins, and it was called The Selfish Gene. And this was just a few years after it had come out, and it was obviously doing very well at that point. And um, I read this book and somehow just absorbed the view that we are just gene machines, that there's just the material, and that's all that it means to be a human being, and that the purpose for our existence is really in passing on our genetic material to the next generation, and the important thing is that our genes survive and make it. Also, I mean, it wasn't until I arrived at university that they used to put catchy titles, the Christian Union, on the stairs going up to the dining hall, and I would see these, and I'd literally never seen these before. I'm like, who are these people that ask questions about life? Because it just hadn't been a feature of my schooling, my upbringing, certainly not the philosophical questions that you raised. I did have Christians in my life. So I was part of a youth group in my high school years that I largely went to because of friendships and romantic interest. I was just, happy to be part of this group. And for me, it was ticking a box, and maybe, in a funny way, I thought, well, maybe this makes me a more rounded person because I'm checking the religious box here. They were kind of astonished when I called them up a few years later and said that I'd become a Christian. In my very first week at Bristol University, they hosted an event called Guerrilla Christian, which was basically four Christians sitting on chairs in a row and a room full of people who were asking them whatever they wanted. And this was an important part of the beginning of my journey, that asking questions is okay. And kind of Christians that are worth their salt want to try and give responses to people's questions, because if something is true, it is worth, it's worth asking questions to find out whether it's true or not. So I put up my hand halfway through this evening, grilling a Christian, and asked, "Surely you can't believe in God and be a scientist at the same time."
mm,
And I was given the answer that actually, yes, you can. And saying that science is in conflict with belief in God is a bit like saying that the software programs and processes that undergird Instagram is in conflict with the existence of Kevin Systrom, its founder and CEO. And of course, those two things are not in conflict. In fact, together they give a more complete understanding of Instagram. And if you try and understand it just with reference to the software and the processes, you end up with a diminished understanding. And it's the same with God and science. The study
mm,
of the mechanisms in the natural world is not in conflict with belief in the one who set it all in motion and continues to uphold it today. And I'd never heard anything like this before, and it really opened up a whole horizon for me of asking more questions and grilling more Christians, which I did over the subsequent 18 months. I spent a lot of time chatting to my then friends and flatmates and roommates about the Christian faith, and we would have conversations on our staircase late into the night. And I also went to a course where I could ask questions, and I probably gave them quite a hard time, actually, just asking. But again, it was a key part of my journey that there were places for me to do that, and there were people that were willing to listen and sit with me and help me.
I think your your mind, I think your inquisitive mind, your desire to know what is true served you very well, because I'm sitting back here thinking there are so many people who just believe a paradigm, or that science and God, they are foes, they are not friends, they do not go together. Either you're scientific or you're religious, either you're reasonable and rational or you're deluded, and that kind of thing. And they don't take time like you did to really start asking those kinds of questions. How do they go together? How can I make sense of an integrated view? What kinds of questions were you trying to get answered in terms of how to understand um, the integration, or the of a faith-centered view, or a God-centered view, which is also grounded in evidence and rationality, but also, this agency mechanism paradigm where there are actually two kinds of sources of knowledge, in a sense, that can go together in a beautiful way. How, how were you kind of moving through this journey? Do you remember any specifics that you were wrestling with?
Yeah, so I mean, a really important one for me at that point was the creation evolution question, because I was studying biochemistry, where kind of, certainly molecular evolution was part of our bread and butter, that this was a process that was taken as fairly kind of standard and just happening, and let's study it. Um, and so, and again, I think I kind of heard somewhere that, that Christians believe certain things about the Bible, or and how to kind of reconcile that with belief in God. And of course, recognize that Christians hold lots of different views on how they make sense of the opening verses of Genesis. But first and foremost, it's not a scientific textbook. It's not giving a scientific account. It is giving an account of things that actually happened, but not in a literal scientific way, and in parallel with kind of creation stories that were happening.
Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. For ages, enlightened scientists believe that this universe did not have a beginning. Atheist scientists clamored against the idea that the universe had a beginning. As Fred Hoyle said, quote, "The reason why scientists like the Big Bang is because they are overshadowed by the book of Genesis. It is deep within the psyche of most scientists to believe the first page of Genesis," end quote. As time has gone on, it is clear that those scientists who sided with Genesis 1:1 got it right, and those against the word of God got it wrong. As that'll prove to be the case every time. Christ is king. Every knee will bow. Absolutely.